Hey everyone, to another episode of Podium Stories. Today I have a really special guest in the building, really meaningful for myself as well. Today we have Mark Schaefer. He's a globally recognized blogger, speaker, educator, consultant, and author. As the executive director of Schaefer Marketing Solutions, he specializes in marketing strategy and social media workshops. His clients include both startups and global brands such as Adidas, J&J, Dell, AT&T, US Air Force, and the UK government. Mark, thank you so much for having us today, for being here.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for including me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So the first time I reached out to you, I believe was on LinkedIn. And I think that represents how we communicate and how we do business together. So I want to hear your thoughts on the way that social media has changed networking and meeting other people and really building businesses at the same time.
Well, it's been transformational in a lot of ways. It's been an obstacle in others, I think. I think the great potential of social media is the opportunity, is the potential. So, when you build an audience, whether it's on, Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever you are, it really represents weak relational links. And believe me, I can tell you this from experience that just having a lot of followers doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of creating business value.
Right.
So the goal, now I'm not dismissing, the importance of social media and a social media audience, because it's provided me an opportunity, for example, to connect with you. We never would have connected if we didn't have this amazing technological opportunity. But now what's happening is you and I, we're on this Zoom call, we're seeing each other face to face, we're collaborating, we're doing something together. And really, who knows where that will lead? So we're starting to move toward from a weak relational link to a strong relational link, where I'm helping you, you're helping me in a way, and that may continue in the future. So that's the opportunity of social media, is not just to settle on these weak relational links, but try to move into real relationships that can help you create true business benefits.
And I'd agree with you because it does seem like the number of followers is a metric that a lot of people aspire to versus building one-on-one connections with those people and actually having conversations on DMs or face-to-face or via Zoom now and really strengthening those relationships, right?
Yes, I think you're right.
Absolutely. So on one of the keynotes, which by the way are amazing and every marketer should watch, you say buyers are saying respect me. And as business, as marketers, as business people, we should look at the people, look at the things that we do that people hate and stop it.
Yes.
So what are those things that we do, especially in B2B, which is more of my area of expertise? What are the things that we're doing that buyers hate and that we should probably stop in general? Obviously, each business is different.
Well, I think what we're seeing, and the main message of my book, Marketing Rebellion, is that it's time for a wake-up call, because marketers have been doing business in a certain way for a long time. We've kind of grown accustomed to that. We have, we're locked in to agency relationships, right? We love being wined and dined by our friends at the agencies, right? When it's time to sign the annual contract. We've built these organizations, these structures that become almost like fortresses to keep things in place. We've got a lot of, companies, the CMOs are very experienced, but maybe cut their teeth on the way business was 10 or 15 years ago. They're sort of out of touch with what's going on today. And what I show in the book is that while in marketing, maybe we make incremental improvements every year, right? We do a little bit better on our Facebook ads, or we do a little bit better on our SEO. The customers have made a dramatic step away from us in another direction. They are so powerful. They are so intelligent now because they're holding the cumulative knowledge of the human race in the palm of their hands, right? They can find out anything. They can learn anything. They can go anywhere, do anything with this power that they have. And that's a dramatic change over just a short period of time of maybe 15 or 20 years, where they were dependent on us
Right.
and our messages and our advertising and our PR, right? And they're not anymore. And the customers are in control. So what I'm urging businesses to do, and I don't think there's any difference between B2B and B2C. I think people are people. They expect to be treated a certain way now. They they don't want to be spammed, right? And lead nurturing. That's a friendly little term we have, basically to say I'm going to keep sending you emails until until I bother you so much that you block me, right? Where did that ever come from, right? We as consumers, we don't like it. So why do we think as marketers it's okay to do robocalls or fill our mailboxes with direct mail that nobody wants anymore? So it's sort of a wake-up call, and it's a difficult wake-up call because it moves away from a lot of these traditional relationships and organizations, but we really don't have a choice because the customers are calling the shots, and we need to do it their way.
So why do you think we're not empathetic enough to understand that? Because I wrote an article the other day written titled "Sell How You Like to Be Sold," right?
Yeah,
Um,
perfect.
and as marketers, in my opinion, I think a lot of it is ego, and
Hmm.
we do things the way we want to sell them versus
Yeah.
understanding how the buyer wants to buy. So why do you think it's stopping us as marketers to like understand the three rebellions that have happened and adapt our messaging to that?
Well, first of all, I want to encourage you to keep writing articles like that because, one of the things about my Marketing Rebellion book is that a lot of the case studies, a lot of the success stories, the companies are being run by younger people who realize exactly what you realize, that I don't like this. I don't want to be marketed that way. Why would we do this to each other, right? And the rebellion is really being led by younger people. I think, I've actually got an article, a blog post that I've been working on that I haven't published yet to answer this question exactly. Why aren't these leaders changing? That when they can see this happening right in front of them, they can see all the information that I've seen. A lot of it is fear. A lot of it is fear of change. A lot of it, and this is an important one, is that a lot of the new ways that we need to market to people, for example, experiential marketing, word of mouth marketing, influence marketing, these are more difficult to measure than something like digital ads or television ads, right? Where we say, okay, TV impressions. I mean, we've got that one down. We've had television around for 60 or 70 years now. So it means in some cases experimenting, abandoning our traditional dashboards. That's really hard to do. And there's this tension sometimes between marketers who see this change coming and the leaders of a company or a board of directors that say, well, we like the way it was before. Let's just keep controlling the message and the advertising. And that's frankly why the CMO position is under attack in a lot of places.
It's so interesting what you said before, and I think you hit the spot right there. Our marketing leaders at enterprise companies and larger companies cut their teeth 10 years ago. So they're doing what worked 10, 15 years ago, not what would work now. And transitioning to the other thing that you were mentioning, the attribution and measuring the success of a content marketing strategy, for example. So that's something that I sell content services for B2B CEOs mostly. And that's one of the challenges that we had. It's hard to measure content marketing and figuring out what the right KPIs should we be tracking. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. What makes a successful content marketing strategy? What KPIs, metrics should we look at? And how can we explain that to our clients?
Well, I think the most important metric in digital marketing is social sharing. And that is a surprising metric when I talk about that to a lot of people, because they're saying, social sharing, isn't that one of those vanity metrics?
Right.
But when you think about it, the economic value of content that is not seen and shared is zero, right? And a lot of B2B companies, especially, they had a drink of the Kool-Aid. They bought into this. They're creating content more and more and more and more, in some ways because they're afraid not to. And you've probably seen the same research that I've seen, that 80% of the content on a B2B website is never seen. They're
Right.
wasting their time right now. So let's talk about, what does this mean? Okay, so the economic value of content comes from transmission. People have to see it, and especially they have to share it, because that represents organic advocacy. People are saying, hey, I saw this thing. I really love this. I want to share it with you. That's better than any advertisement we could ever take out, right? People believe each other. They're not going to believe your company, but they believe
Right.
each other. So now let's step back and think about, what does it take to get content to be shared? Number one, you've got to create something great that's worthy of sharing. Number two, you've got to be in tune with your audience to know who is out there sharing, why are they sharing, what are they sharing. So you really need to know, that audience really well. And number three, you need to show up. You need to reward those people. You need to engage with those people. Now think about that. Creating the best content, being connected to your audience, showing up and engaging, that drives the right behaviors in your marketing department, right? Those are the things you need to be doing anyway. If you do those things really, really well, I think picking the right metric is critically important, because that drives the metric, that drives the behavior in your marketing department. And I think, other than conversions, which is the holy grail, of course, social sharing is the most important KPI in content marketing.
I love that. I never thought about that as well, like you did, because one of the things I've been writing a lot is exactly what you just said, right? Picking the right metrics incentivizes behaviors.
Yeah.
You can incentivize the right or the wrong behaviors, but I never thought about social sharing as such an important metric.
Well,
Right?
that's the whole reason.
About revenue, but I love social sharing as well.
Excuse me. Yeah, that's the whole reason behind this book that I wrote called The Content Code. Because the problem we're facing is that we have this tsunami of content out there, and this unbelievable amount of competition for everything that we do. And the challenge is, okay, we're creating pretty good content, and we're really trying to build our audience. And what we need to do is now build a third competency. Yes, you need great content. Yes, you need to build an audience, but you have to build an internal competency of ignition. How do we get it to move? So that's what that book is all about, is the strategies that companies can take to get content to move, because that's where the value is.
I love that. And that was actually my next question, but I think we've touched a little bit on this. How do you get people to actually consume the content, right? Like making it so good that they share it is a great strategy. What about paid ads to consume content with no, so companies that are using paid ads to fuel that fire, but using paid ads not as the intent of conversion, but as intent of distributing content. Have you seen that to work effectively?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that can be a very effective strategy. I want to emphasize that there's no strategy that fits everybody.
Right.
I think, I hesitate to say, yes, this is the way to go, or, this is the thing to do, because it's different for every single company. And you need to dig down and, look at the competition and look at the customers and look, for many companies, something as simple as blogging might work, right? Because they're in an unsaturated niche where there's not a lot of that going on. Video content or a podcast, that might work very well. So you need to be careful to really assess every single situation, and before you build your strategy, start with the data, start with the assessment. I often say the most important word in marketing is maneuver, right? You got to figure out, how can you move? Where are you not blocked in? How can we do something different to stand out? And that answer is different for almost every company.
I love that. Makes a lot of sense. In your book, Known, you talk a lot about personal branding, and that's something that I built a small but good business around, working mostly with the C-suite personal branding in B2B. So how would you position that, and what advice would you give B2B CEOs when it comes to growing their personal brand, and when it comes to start creating content for them as well?
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, it's sort of the same theme here. I mean, that might not be the strategy for everybody,
Right.
because to really embrace that, you have to understand it and you have to love it, because even if someone's helping you create the content, it's still something that you have to internalize and believe in and support, and add your energy to. So, if you don't love it, it's probably not going to work. Now, for those, executives that understand it, I think it's one of the most important marketing activities we can do, because the research shows in a very profound way that people generally do not believe companies anymore.
Right.
They don't believe advertising anymore, but they do believe people. They believe executives. They believe technical experts. They believe founders, right? People believe people. They want to hear a real voice, even if it's not a perfect voice, right? I think, look at someone like Elon Musk. This is a company that's been around 10 or 11 years. They have a higher market value. Tesla has a higher market value than Ford Motor Company. Why? I think a lot of that is people there's this equity in the founder. They believe the founder. He's not a perfect person. He's an engineer and talks like an engineer and thinks like an engineer, but he's one of the most important entrepreneurs of our generation. And a lot of people admire that. Who do you love at Ford? Who's the person you love, right?
No idea.
Who's the person that you love at, your cable company or your data provider, or your insurance company. And that's why a lot of these big companies are failing, because they don't have that emotional connection to a person. And that's what people want today. So if you're an executive in a position to do that, that's one of the most important things you can do for your company.
What about if someone watching this says, that's fine and dandy, but my company doesn't build rockets to Mars or build electric cars that can change the world? What if I just run an insurance company like the 300 others in my state? What should I create content about?
Well, I mean, I think that if you're competing against 300 different competitors, then that would probably suggest this is the most important thing that you can do.
I would agree with you.
Because again, what's marketing about? It's about maneuvering, right? And I'll bet those 300 insurance companies that you're competing against, there's nobody out there standing out as a personal brand and taking that leadership. And so it is an important way to maneuver. Great branding is about creating an emotional connection to what you do and your audience. And today, it's increasingly difficult, especially to reach a younger audience, with these claims that nobody believes, but they do believe people. It's one of the few ways that you can really, cut through today. And it can't be content that's legally approved. It's got to be real. It's got to be human. It's got to be approachable. It's got to be even vulnerable. You have to admit when you're wrong and make mistakes, and when you're learning, and when you're, confused or something, right? That's what really builds connections and trust with people. And, there's a lot of executives who are going to resist that, but that's how it works.
Absolutely. I think we see things very, very similarly. I have two more questions before we wrap this up. The first one, we've been talking a lot about marketing, and I see something in many companies where there's a fight and there's pressure between the marketing department and the sales department, and companies are struggling to allocate budget and personnel. So how do you see that fight, if you want to call it that, between marketing and sales within companies?
Well, I mean, there's always tension between different departments in a company, and usually that's good, because they may have different objectives and they may have different time frames, and hopefully there's somebody at the top that can bring everybody together under one umbrella. But the biggest, I think, challenge today, especially in this environment of the marketing rebellion that we talked about, is that salespeople are coin operated, right? They're coin operated, right? They're incentivized by certain monetary goals in a certain time frame. Marketing is about building, acquiring customers and creating demand for something, and those two time frames may not work together.
Right.
And increasingly, especially if you're in a public company that has quarterly goals, marketing to real people doesn't work that way, right? Creating that demand, creating emotional connection takes time. It might take months, might take years, right? And there aren't many companies that have that, that have that sort of enlightened understanding or patience. But we can't run our companies today on what we wish for. We have to run our companies based on what is. Now, I used to work for a public company, so I have a tremendous amount of empathy and respect for people that have to make those numbers. That tension is always going to have to be there. So like I said, somewhere at the top of the company, hopefully those two organizations report to someone that can kind of see both sides and keep the peace and give the marketing people the space they need and the salespeople the numbers they need to keep things going in the right direction.
I love that. And the last question I want to ask you, it's a very selfish question. You have, I think all of these questions were pretty much selfish, but you have built an amazing career as a public speaker, somebody who goes to companies and does workshops. I'm really interested on the public speaking part. And it's something that obviously it's not my goal right now because it's running the business, but I can see in 5 to 10 years. And I wanted to ask you, what's the advice you would give somebody like me? I'm 23 right now, who when he's on his 30s would like to start doing a bit of more public speaking and getting on stages as well.
Well, I think, becoming a public speaker can really accelerate your journey to becoming known. Because whenever you're up on a stage, even if you're feeling nervous and insecure, the people in the audience see you as the authority. Right? They're cheering you on because they want to take something away from you. All right. So every time you get up on a stage, you're seen as an authority. You're helping your personal brand. So something like, becoming a public speaker can really help that. And certainly if C-level executives are interested in something like that, it's something that I would recommend. Right. Now, in terms of getting started, I mean, this is the way I get started. I think it's the way everybody gets started, is you have to be very humble and just start to kind of practice your craft. And I mean, the first speech I ever gave, I mean, when I was in the corporate world, I used to give presentations, and sometimes I would be a guest speaker at a college class or something. But in terms of really doing public speaking, my first public speaking was probably about 11 or 12 years ago. And it was to like a Lions Club in Farragut, Tennessee, in front of, 12 people or something, right? And that's the most humble of circumstances. But the more you do it, you kind of learn, you grow confident. You find what works, what doesn't work. You can start, figuring out how to overcome problems that you have along the way. And then people start to see you and they start inviting you to bigger events. And it's sort of like a snowball rolling, right? And, there's a great lesson I learned. I tell this story often that there's a famous rock band called the Black Keys. And they're one of the biggest rock bands in the world right now. Now, they can play arenas like Madison Square Garden. Well, I got to meet them, maybe 7 years ago. And they were right sort of like breaking out in their career. And they had just put out a big album and they were playing bigger venues. And I said, was there a time when, there was like some catalytic event, something that really changed things, that propelled you into this new level. And the Patrick Carney, the drummer from the Black Keys, told me, no, there really wasn't. You just keep on working, and every year you do a little bit better. You go out and you play in front of these people, and they like you, and they tell your friends, and you come back next year and you play a place that's a little bit bigger, and then the next year it's a little bit bigger. And that's the way it is with a podcast. That's the way it is with a blog. That's the way it is with a personal brand. And I wrote a blog post recently where I showed the subscriber count to my blog. And it was just an absolute straight line up. Now, I've had articles go viral, but there's no bumps. Right. It's amazing, actually, to see it.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. And it's exactly the same as the Black Keys said. You just keep on doing it. And every year, it's a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, until you have that critical mass where, you're starting to realize business benefits. So that's the biggest problem that people have, whether it's building a personal brand or working on something like content marketing. They give up too soon, right? It might take months or years for the things to really happen. So you can't give up too soon.
Awesome, Mark. I don't think there's better advice than that. I really appreciate your time. So I want to wrap this up, but we could go for hours. Thank you so much for being here. Where can our listeners reach out to you or connect with you or consume your content?
Yeah, you can find me at businessesgrow.com. You can find my blog, my podcast, my books, and everything about me there. And you can also see my social media connections. I'd love to hear from your listeners, and thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure being with you to talk to someone who is so well prepared and so familiar with me. So you've done a great job.
I appreciate it, Mark. And thank you everyone for listening. Feel free to subscribe, share. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.